Richard Beranek entered a courtroom, now a man only charged with 9 felonies rather than convicted of them.
We are right back where this case was immediately before the trial started in February of 1990.
Welcome to Convoluted. I'm Jesse Asher, and in today's episode I'm going to tell you about a Wisconsin man who was wrongfully convicted for sexual assault that took place in 1990. And of course I will include all my sources below in the information. You can just click on any single one of them that you want, kind of read about some of this on your own. On March 2nd, 1987 in Dane County, Wisconsin, a man threatened a woman, beat her, and sexually assaulted her in her own home. And the victim was 28 years old at the time, and in all my sources she is identified as KD. KD, the victim, according to the National Registry of Exonerations, would eventually notify police that she had been stalked for months, receiving multiple calls from a man that was propositioning her for sex. Continuing from the National Registry of Exonerations, which I will be doing so a lot in this episode as well, apparently a man handed the victim's daughter a note in a parking lot that stated he wanted to have sex with her mom. On the day of this crime, KD, the victim, explained that she received 2 calls, one at 1 p.m. and another at 3 p.m. And then she proceeded to take her children to her sister-in-law's home, actually. And what she told police was that after returning home, she started to get ready for a date, and a man just suddenly appeared out of her closet and started to assault her. As many would expect, this victim was very traumatized and withheld information initially from the police, and as a result, unfortunately no rape kit was able to be provided. I want to mention something about stalking because stalking has never really been taken seriously in the United States, especially in the 80s, and it still isn't really taken seriously today. And so I wanted to mention a woman by the name of Laura Richards. If you listen to some podcasts, you may know her name. Laura Richards is the founder of Paladin and helped develop the Dash Risk Identification Assessment and Management model, which they use in the UK. And so I would advise you do some Googling on Laura Richards, and she has a couple podcasts. One that I listen to a lot of is Real Crime Profile with Jim Clemente as well, who you can Google him and you'll learn some stuff about him quickly. Paladin is the world's first national stalking advocacy service in the UK, and I'll provide a link for that below. I'm going to quote from the website on the definition of the Dash Risk model. Quote, implemented across all police services in the UK from March 2009, having been accredited by ACPO Council, now known as National Police Chief Council, or NPCC. I'll also provide a link for that below, and I'd really advise everybody to take a look at the Dash Risk Assessment model. The Dash assessment is used for domestic violence, stalking, harassment, and honor-based violence as well. So do yourself a favor, check out Laura Richards, check out Paladin, check out the Dash Risk Assessment model. Anyway, back to the case. According to the Innocence Project, the victim gave the police a description of the attacker, describing him as a white man in dark pants and a light shirt. She also said that he was clean-shaven and roughly 5'8" to 5'10". The victim, KD, met with a police sketch artist 10 days after the crime and claimed that the composite sketch was 90% accurate. That sketch showed a man with shoulder-length hair, no facial hair, and a cleft chin, and the man was described as being mid-30s with blue eyes. Katie left her home, but a few weeks later she went back to begin the moving process so she could move into a new apartment. And when she took the bedding and mattress pad off of her bed, she put it in the washing machine, but it was overloaded, so it stopped. So when she pulled all that bedding out, she actually found a pair of men's underwear, and so she proceeded to take that to her rape counselor, and the counselor turned it over to the police. About a year after the assault, she moved back to her old home, where she still would receive obscene calls. After unsuccessful attempts to trace the calls, a person called and said, quote, I'm quoting from the National Registry of Exonerations here, "I know cops are there, but that won't stop me." The very next day, she spotted and told police about a red car with no license plate and a CB radio antenna that was following her, but it pulled off when she pulled up to another cop car. During the investigation, Katie was shown a photographic lineup 14 times and no identification was ever made. Later on though, an 8-photo lineup was sent to the Dane County Sheriff's investigators, who then proceeded to show it to KD. And in that 8-photo lineup, she identified her attacker and claimed she was, quote, almost positive, but the guy she chose had dark hair, dark eyes, not the blue that she had originally said, and the guy had a thick mustache at the time of the crime. And that guy was Richard Beranek, who was 30 years old at the time. In March of 1989, Richard was to serve 10 years in prison after a no contest plea for sexually assaulting a 16-year-old girl in Boomer, Wisconsin. And according to the National Registry of Exonerations, Boomer is actually more than 200 miles from where the victim KD lived. He was also being held in jail due to that crime and couldn't have possibly made the calls that KD reported in 1989. Beranek, I'm going with Beranek. Beranek was a suspect because the officers thought that he resembled a sketch, and that's when they sent the 8-photo lineup to Dane County. Richard went to trial in Dane County Circuit Court in February of 1990, with the only physical evidence tying him to the crime scene was a hair that they found in the victim's underwear, or the underwear that she found in her washing machine. And this is where we get to bring up some fun junk science. So we're gonna welcome Mr. Wayne Oakes of the FBI. He was a hair analyst for the FBI. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, Wayne testified that the hair was microscopically the same as the hair from Richard's head. Wayne Oakes testified to having performed 3,000 plus hair examinations involving, quote, billions of hairs during the 8 years he was as an analyst. And here's a fun quote from the National Registry of Exonerations. Wayne Oakes said, "I have never not been able to differentiate between two Caucasian head hairs." FBI agent Michael Malone, who was Oakes' supervisor, examined the hairs as well, according to Oakes, and Oakes claimed that he said he concurred with me that the two hairs match. Art Variali, I'm probably messing that up, testified for the defense that given the state of the art of hair comparisons, it's not possible at this time to identify a questioned hair back to a given individual. He also said that the hair was highly consistent with Richard's hair. Art Variali, that same dude, he was a hair analyst from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. And Wayne Oakes, this isn't the only wrongful conviction that he has been a part of. There's another man by the name of George Parrott, P-E-R-R-O-T, who was actually exonerated as well, and I will hopefully do an episode on him in the future too. I'm gonna keep his name on my list. This Wisconsin Watch article I used by D. Hall goes into more detail about hair analysis and exonerations from proof that hair analysis is junk and leads to wrongful convictions. And according to an article from the Wisconsin Watch, written by that same lady, D. Hall, Richard is among at least 13 in Wisconsin where the FBI acknowledges the use of flawed hair analytics, which has now been discredited. In addition to this junk by Wayne Oakes, Beranek had an alibi, actually a few. Richard was in North Dakota with his sister and her husband more than 600 miles away during the crime, and that's according to the National Registry of Exonerations. And he also had multiple family members testify to that. The claims were that he didn't even return to Wisconsin until 4 days after the attack that happened on KD. And there were things to back this up a little bit too, some of the witnesses saying Richard painted 2 rooms in the house in North Dakota with his sister's husband. There were records presented showing Richard's name on a food stamps application that showed Richard as living with his sister and her husband during that time. And there's phone records that show Richard's mother had called the house in North Dakota to confirm that he had arrived after she bought him a bus ticket. But as we know, nobody ever believes familial witnesses. So the jury was essentially misled, and the prosecution didn't help because they were reinforcing the hair analysis as being, quote, absolutely identical and an incredible phenomenon. Richard was convicted by the jury on 5 counts of sexual assault, 2 counts of burglary, 1 count of endangerment, and also 1 count of victim intimidation on February 8th, 1990. fall of 2011, Richard Beranek was excluded as a source for the hair, and none of his DNA was found on any of the clothing items, and that was also thanks to the Innocence Project of New York and the Wisconsin Innocence Project when they filed a new motion seeking DNA testing on multiple items. A joint review was conducted by the Innocence Project and the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and the FBI then informed Dane County authorities of that joint review that Wayne Oakes had given testimony that was unreliable and erroneous. Now I'm just going to quote another section verbatim from the National Registry of Exonerations. In addition, Oakes testified to a statistical weight or probability that the hair came from Beranek that could have led the jury to believe that valid statistical weight can be assigned to a microscopic hair association, the FBI said. This type of testimony exceeds the limits of science. A motion seeking a new trial was then filed in 2016 by Richard Beranek, and a three-day hearing was held in February of 2017. Judge Moser vacated Beranek's conviction and ordered a new trial. And I'm going to quote again directly from the National Registry of Exonerations. Quote, "The hair evidence was an important part of the state's case," Moser ruled. "There is no way to be sure as how much weight the jury gave to the hair evidence, but based upon the totality of the evidence, one cannot conclude that the hair evidence was insignificant." Richard was then released, and in May of 2018, the county's state's attorneys filed a motion to dismiss the charges. In preparation for retrial, the prosecution consulted, and according to Wisconsin Watch, Mr. John Wixted, and I'll quote, "John Wixted, a psychology professor at the University of San Diego in La Jolla, California, said the victim's identification of Beranek was made with high confidence and using what appears to be a fair photo lineup, adding that the 2-year delay between the crime and identification of Beranek was not a crucial variable." And I'm going to quote again from the Wisconsin Watch article by D. Hall. "The prosecution said while it still has a strong belief in Beranek's guilt, it was dropping the charges to spare the victim of the 1987 home invasion and sexual assault from additional trauma." On May 17, 2018, the judge granted the motion to dismiss the charges, but Richard Beranek was to remain a registered sex offender because of his prior conviction, but he was released. Thank you guys for watching to the end of the video. Make sure to follow and like, subscribe, share, comment, all that crap. And of course, stay tuned for more Convoluted episodes. More importantly, make sure to take some time to check out the Innocence Project and the Wisconsin Innocence Project. You can donate, volunteer, just do some research. Make sure to also check out the National Registry of Exonerations. All of those I will link below, along with my other sources. And once again, thank you guys. Have a good night or day.